Hi, I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and welcome to 3 healing ways to help a client manage their toxic mother. A good therapist can show a client how to set boundaries, So someone said, I'm convinced that she has a narcissistic personality disorder when talking about her mother. Now, when I was growing up, this client said, she used to tell me over and over that I was too ugly, stupid, and fat to ever amount to anything. And then she'd tell me that if I really loved her, I would always do what she asked. It's like she was terrified I get too full of myself or something. It's a fat chance with her around. Now, Mary, who was a client, sighed and sat back in her chair, dejected. Toxic people are scattered across our paths in life. The difficult co-worker claiming credit for your work, the sociopathic partner sapping your self-esteem, the narcissistic friend charming you out of whatever they want from you without ever returning the favor. So most people, of course, are not like this, but it's as well to be aware that some people are. Toxic people wear us down with their vampiric demands. They need to be managed. But what happens when the toxic person in your life is your own mother? It's a case of toxic fallout from Mommie Dearest. Mary told me in detail of the heartache, the letdowns, the humiliation, fear and misery of being a daughter to her mother. And it had always been hard, and it still was. And she said, I feel guilty talking about her like this, but she's driving me nuts. And she's getting older, and as she does so, she's becoming even more demanding. And I've got so much resentment building up inside of me, it makes me feel sick, she said. So what exactly was going on with Mary and her mother? Feeding the mouth that bites you. I've always felt like I've had to apologize to my mum just for being alive, she said. I'm almost 50 now, but she still makes me cry. So Mary spoke of how her mother had always ruled the roost and how Mary's father had been terrified of Mary's mother as well. She told me how her mother unashamedly brought other men home even when Mary's father was there, how her mother would beat her coldly. It was just routine, Mary said. And she told me how her mother turned the charm on and off to convince others that she was all sweetness and light, and that Mary was a very lucky girl to have such a delightful mother. And I was getting sick of Mary's mother, and I'd never met the woman. Okay, but Mark, she said, the crazy thing is, I've always been so desperate to please her, to make her like me. And of course, that's part of the tangled mess that is the relationship with a narcissistic parent. Desperately needing them to like you, to love you, wanting their respect or craving their admiration and kindness, wanting them to finally give you what they've never given you. And toxic people tend to know that you crave their approval, and they use this knowledge to fuel their own parasitical intent. Okay. Abuse from the narcissist. So grim and gloomily, Mary told me how her mother had cut up her dresses as Mary blossomed into youthful womanhood, how she'd seduced Mary's second boyfriend, how the vanity and cruelty of her mother's youth was now collapsing into a vindictive bitterness as she aged. Mary's 80-year-old mother lived only a block away, but phoned Mary every day, sometimes for an hour at a time. And she claimed she was ill when she was perfectly well and constantly clutching at and hanging onto the limelight. Okay. She wanted all the attention, but never wanted to give any attention back, except as a way of getting more for herself. And it wasn't just between Mary and her mother. The old woman would regale Mary's children, her own grandchildren, with Mary's lifelong shortcomings, and would often tell neighbours that Mary never bothered with her and they hadn't spoken in years in spite of those long daily hour-long phone calls, even though they lived so close. And to top it all, although physically perfectly hale and hearty, her mother insisted that she couldn't be left on her own and must come with Mary and her family whenever they went away. Mary couldn't win. And she said, what can I do, Mark? Help, I don't know what to do. I'm just waiting around for her to die. I'm not that kind of person, but I can't go on like this. Which was true. In 5 heroic ways to help your client deal with a narcissist, I suggested how you might help your clients deal with narcissistic manipulators. Here I want to give you 3 ideas to help clients whose mothers happen to be highly toxic people. Okay, so 3 ways to tackle the toxic mother. First off, okay, number 1, you can only get what there is to get. So after talking with Mary about how she was always so desperate to have approval and even love from her mum, I suddenly and playfully held out my hand and said, Mary, I want you to give me £10 million. Please give it to me right now in cash. And of course, Mary laughed at my strangeness, but I persevered with mock seriousness. I said, come on, Mary, this therapy doesn't come cheap. Please give me £10 million right now. And eventually she said, well, I can't. And I said, well, why ever not? And she said, because I haven't got it to give. I don't have that. I can't give you what I haven't got to give. But I want it now. But I can't give you what I haven't got. And eventually I said, exactly. And you can rest assured this session will be as reasonably priced as the others. And when we met up again, okay, long after her sessions with me were over, Mary told me how in the months and years following her therapy, whenever she found herself trying to extract some tiny bit of approval from her mother, my ridiculous demand would come back to mind, and she'd hear me saying, you can't give what you haven't got to give. Okay. Her approval craving stopped, and Mary was much freer as a result. But Mary also needed to change her own behavior towards her mother. So step 2, plan a detox. Exposure to toxic people is, surprise, surprise, toxic. So you may have noticed how obnoxiousness gets in your head after being around toxic people. Okay, they leave an imprint on you, so to speak. It's as if your mind needs to somehow decompress before you can function normally again after being with such a person. Mary's mother had done enough damage in her life, and Mary needed, as I put it, to detoxify herself. So we drew up a plan to reduce and limit Mary's mother exposure. Mary decided she would speak to her mother on the phone only 3 times a week for only 20 minutes. She would visit her mother once a week and stay for just 1 hour. And we also devised a verbal response plan. What Mary might say to manage her mother's put-downs and insults calmly, clearly, politely, but firmly. And we practiced that. And at first Mary felt she couldn't possibly neglect her mother like that. Okay, and I said rather bluntly, it must be said, that Mary's mother was lucky beyond belief that her daughter hadn't broken off all contact decades ago. Okay. Finally, although Mary was excited about making these changes, she was still basically scared. So we had to deal with that fear. So number 3, step 3, deal with the fears. Knowing what to do is a world away from knowing how to feel when you do what you know you've got to do. So I asked Mary, how do you want to feel when you start setting clear, firm boundaries with your mother? And she said, I want to feel calm and resolute. So I helped Mary go into a deep state of relaxation and had her hypnotically visualize observing herself setting these limits calmly but firmly. And research has found that when people imagine seeing themselves from the outside, okay, in doing new behaviors, they become much more likely then to actually carry out those future preferred behaviors. Okay, so see reference 1 at the bottom of the written material. We did this hypnotic mental rehearsal over and over until Mary couldn't think about setting boundaries with her manipulative mother without feeling calm and resolute. So this isn't a comprehensive list of everything I did to help Mary, of course, but these particular psychotherapy techniques for dealing with a narcissistic parent or helping your client do so really got Mary on her way to a life that she could enjoy much more. So I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please hit like and subscribe. And if you want to hear when my next video is published, hit the notification bell below. I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and if you'd like to subscribe to my email newsletter, you can find it over at unk.com/blog. Thanks for watching.